What's that? They should. Am I on the screen? No, I just put a link in the Facebook to the YouTube.
But there's streaming and recording on that one before you hit go live on the other.
It should be just recording.
Yeah, it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So does anybody need a small catechism? Anybody that doesn't have one with them? And actually, I don't know if you know it or not, but it's in the hymnal as well. Huh? You need one? Yeah, I do have a handout. There, I'll give you guys the new one. You share that with your husband. All right. Okay. So anyway, last week we talked about kind of the founding of the Lutheran Church. We talked about Martin Luther and all his, what he did and the stuff that was going on at that time. And then we talked about the founding of the LCMS and guys like C.F.W. Walther and the things that he did and how that got going on. And that brought us to, and we talked about a little bit about the book of Concord, the Lutheran Confessions. When you're confirmed, or when you become a member of the church, the index on this is in a funny place. So there it is, right in the beginning, funny place, right? There's so much other stuff in the front with it. When you are confirmed, confirmation, 272, in the rite of confirmation, you say, do you confess the doctrine of the evangelical Lutheran Church drawn from the Scriptures, as you have learned to know that from the small catechism, to be faithful and true? And it says, and you say, yes, I do. Okay, or I do. That all of that comes from that Book of Concord. That's where that comes from. And all of that is drawn from Scripture. When I went to seminary, I had a big debate with one of our professors, and his interesting professor. June remembers him. He wore red tennis shoes all the time. Professor Akamoto. And very, very, very good guy, great professor. We were having class, and he said, whenever you have a question about your faith, whenever you have a question about, how you should live your life, that kind of thing, the very first place you should go is the Lutheran Confessions. And I went, wait a minute. Shouldn't we go to the Bible first? Isn't that the word? Shouldn't we go to the Bible first? And he said, yeah. But he said the Bible is definitely the word and the ultimate authority and all that. But he says, okay, I have a question on, I don't remember what question he gave me, but he said, I have a question about something to do with faith. Where are you going to look it up? Where are you going to find it in here? You got to read the whole thing, right? But, in the meantime, you might have missed your answer. But if you go here first and you look up and see what it says about faith, it then tells you where in the Bible it says that. Because this is all reference. This, Luther and Melanchthon and the guys that wrote this didn't just throw it together. It all came from Scripture, which is why they stood so firmly behind it, because it's all based on the Word of God. So they threw together this Lutheran Confessions, and I printed out this first page here so you can see. I talked about, it's really a lot of different things thrown together. There's the three ecumenical or universal creeds. We have the Apostles' Creed that we say just about every Sunday. We have the Nicene Creed that I try to say once a month or so. And then we have the Athanasian Creed, which we say once a year just because it's so long. And the other thing is the Athanasian Creed, because of the way it's written, can be confusing to some people, because the Athanasian Creed speaks of works. And sometimes people get a little confused in thinking that works is what gets you to heaven, not faith. So whenever we do the Athanasian Creed, we always kind of do it with explanation, And that's why we do it once a year, and it's usually on Holy Trinity Sunday, which is the day that we kind of celebrate the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, because that's what the Athanasian Creed was written to address. It was written to address the people who said that Jesus was really God but not really man, or he was really a man who just happened to be a good guy, and the Holy Spirit isn't the same as Jesus and God. He's different, he's lesser, the Athanasian Creed addresses all of those issues. And like I say, and sometimes it can be kind of confusing, and we can look at that later on, and because it does do a pretty good job of trying to explain it. Trying to explain the Holy Trinity, which is in a sense, I have been known to say that it's impossible for us to completely understand how the Trinity works. It's above the human mind. When you talk about God being here and Jesus being here and the Holy Spirit being here, but yet they're all one, and how exactly does that work? And it can be very confusing. And trying to teach it to young people can be even more confusing. And the problem is, too, is if you go out on YouTube, I could probably find some of those. They have some things where they talk about, you'll hear people say, well, the Trinity is like water. It can be a vapor, it can be water, or it can liquid, or it can be a solid. It has three states: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. No, because water, liquid, isn't gas, and gas isn't solid, but yet with the Holy Spirit and the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, they're all the same. They're all one. So, and I've also heard it talked of as the three-cornered hat, like the Revolutionary War they wore, the three-cornered hat. Each side of the hat was Father, Son, Holy Spirit. I've heard of the apple. We have the skin, we have the meat, and we have the core. But none of those things really work because they all stand separate. And Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are never separate. They're all one. And so it is kind of unique in how do you try and teach people something that is, to me, somewhat incomprehensible. So that's the challenge. And the Confessions addresses that a little bit as well. I shouldn't say a little bit, a fair amount, because that was part of the argument too. So there are three creeds are in there first. Then there's the Augsburg Confession, which was, as I said last week, that was actually written by a gentleman by the name of Philip Melanchthon with the help of Luther. It was presented to Charles V at the Diet of Augsburg, and then the Catholic Church wrote a rebuttal to the Augsburg Confession, which they wouldn't give to the Lutheran delegation unless they signed and agreed to it. But they knew that they were going to do that, so they brought scribes, and when they read it, they wrote the whole thing down. So we have a copy of what it says. I believe it's called a refutation. And then after the refutation, then the Lutheran group got together and wrote what's called the Apology of the Augsburg Confession, or the defense of the Augsburg Confession, which is in there. Then we have Luther's large catechism and the small catechism. And then in there are the small called articles. It was called the Smalkaldic League. It was a group of German princes that all got together to stand up against the Holy Roman Emperor. And they actually wound up in the end going to war over this, and then the Smalkaldic League actually lost. But by that time, things had progressed too far, and the Lutheranism had already spread, and they couldn't stop it. So, but the Smalkaldic League, when they got together, they kind of filled in the blanks from the Augsburg Confession and the defense to the Augsburg Confession. They expanded on that where people had tried to raise questions. And then there's the Treatise on the Power and Primacy of the Pope. That was written by Luther, and he's talking about how actually Luther claims that the papacy is the Antichrist. Not the Pope himself, but the office of the papacy and what they claim to be able to do. You know, that the Pope is the vicar of Christ, and whatever he says is more superior even to Scripture. And Luther contradicts that, and that's what that power and primacy of the Pope is. And it's fun to read. It's kind of interesting. And what's interesting about it is when we say that we agree with the Lutherans and we believe with the Lutheran doctrine, then we're agreeing with the Treatise on the Power of the Pope. So that means that we too are saying that the Pope is the Antichrist. So, so if you want to step out there, you know, then they have the, I used to call it the epitome, but it's the epitome of the formula of Concord, which is, once again, going into more detail. They're answering more questions. They're trying to set things straight. And then the solid declaration of the formula of Concord, which is the clarification of the epitome of Concord, which is clarifying the defense of the Augsburg Confession, which is clarifying the Augsburg Confession. So it's all of it is just trying to strengthen what it is that we believe. So if you have a question about faith, sin, anything like that, you can go into this book of Concord and you can look it up and you can find it and you can see what the early church fathers said about it. And part of the reason that they did all this was because of what Luther found. Remember, we talked last week about how if you had a Bible in the 16th century, you were a pretty special person, because not anybody had a Bible. Most priests in most churches didn't even have a Bible because they were that hard to come by. And because of that, priests could only teach and preach what they had been taught. And what Luther found out is that a lot of them hadn't been taught very much. And the person in charge of each area was a bishop. And they had bishops all over the place. And while they weren't supposed to be, bishops' positions could be bought. And a lot of bishops made a lot of money. And bishops received a percentage of all of the money that all of the churches collected. And when what's his name, I can't think of his name now, came to Luther's area, to Wittenberg, and he was selling indulgences. Yeah, Tetzel. When Tetzel was selling his indulgences, he had the backing of the local bishop because a cut of what Tetzel sold went to him, and he was still trying to pay off the loan that he borrowed from the Dutch to buy his bishopdom. I don't remember. Yeah, Elder was one Tetzel was working for, because they were in, I'm trying to remember I don't remember the bishop's name. And there were some bishops in that area that actually had several, I guess you'd call them, the Catholic Church nowadays would call them dioceses. You know, each diocese had a bishop that oversaw it. And if you had enough money and enough pull, you could have multiple dioceses. You know, you could be the bishop over a couple of places and then make even more money, you know, and have more power and influence over the people. And at that time, church power was also political power, because the churches did a lot of appointing of political positions and approving or disapproving of political positions and things like that. So if somebody wanted a political position, they would come to the bishop and they could maybe, grease the bishop's palm to put this guy in that position. Yeah. So what I wanted to read to you, just because it's kind of fun to read, and you can have it to take with. This is the preface to the Small Catechism that Luther wrote in 1529. Luther was left in charge of the area around Wittenberg and all of the churches for a while. The guy who normally oversaw it had to go to Rome or something, or went somewhere, and Luther was left in charge. So Luther went out and he visited all of the congregations that were in his assigned area. And when he got done, that's when he started writing the small and the large catechism. And this was his introduction, or the preface to the small catechism. Martin Luther, to all faithful and godly pastors and preachers, grace, mercy, and peace be yours in Jesus Christ our Lord. That's probably the nicest thing gets said in this whole letter. He begins, the deplorable, miserable conditions which I recently observed when visiting the parishes have constrained and pressed me to put this catechism of Christian doctrine into this brief, plain, and simple form. How pitiable, so help me God, were the things I saw. The common man, especially in the villages, knows practically nothing of Christian doctrine, and many of the pastors are almost completely incompetent and unable to teach. Yet all the people are supposed to be Christians, have been baptized, or the 10 Commandments, have been baptized and received the Holy Sacrament, even though they do not know the Lord's Prayer, the Creed, or the 10 Commandments, and live like poor animals of the barnyard and pig pen. What these people have mastered, however, is the fine art of tearing all Christian liberty to shreds. Ouch. Yeah, ouch. Oh, yeah. Luther never pulled punches. That's the one thing I love about the guy. Oh, you bishops. So now this is what he said about the local people and the pastors. And who's responsible for the local people and the pastors? The bishops. Oh, you bishops. How will you ever answer to Christ for letting the people carry on so disgracefully and not attending to the duties of your office even for a moment? One can only hope judgment does not strike you. You command the sacrament in one kind only, insist on the observance of your human ways, and are unconcerned whether the people know the Lord's Prayer, the Creed, the 10 Commandments, or indeed any of God's Word. Woe, woe to you forever. Now, when he says over here, he said, you command the sacrament in only one kind. That's a practice that the Catholic Church did for many, many years, is the people only received the bread. They didn't receive the wine. The bishops and the priests didn't feel the people were able to receive the wine or ready to receive the wine. You know, the Catholic Church, now we preach that the body, blood and body and blood of Christ are in, with, and under the bread and wine. How they're there, we don't know. We can't explain it. We just know they're there because Christ said they're there. The Catholic Church believes that the bread and wine turn into body and blood, transmutation, or transfiguration, transmutation, I think, and transubstantiation, it's one of them big words. But they believe it actually changes, so that, and that's why, remember I mentioned last week when Luther went to do his first Mass, he was terrified. He was terrified that he might drop the wafer or spill the wine. I mean, if I dumped one of those little cups on the carpet as a Catholic priest and not that far back, I would be eating the carpet so that I could consume the wine that spilled into the carpet, because you couldn't leave it there and you couldn't wash it out. You know, that's, yeah.
On a side note, is that why the carpet's red?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just the color. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that was done intentionally for that reason. But yeah. But you know, and we do still respect the consecrated elements. You know, when I go up there, this is my body, and you know, this, we feel then that Christ is present in those elements. Now, once the service is over, once those things are put away, then Christ's presence has left them. You know, we don't consider it still. The Catholic Church, no. That's why if you've ever been to a Catholic church, up in front, they got a little lock box. and they put this, whatever they didn't use or don't eat or drink, they put in that lockbox to save for next time. Now, we save it for next time too, but we do it just because why throw it away? You know, but we do, like in the cup, when we have the chalice, you know, some of us use the common cup. At the end of the service with the common cup, we do not dump it down the drain because we feel that's a little disrespectful. We actually take it outside and pour it on the ground. You know, just because, huh?
That was a practice that I abhorred
What's that?
before I got here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, and truthfully, there are some Lutheran churches that dislike the use of the plastic individual cups that we dispose of for that kind of same reason. You know, but, you know, on the one hand, yes, there's still wine in there. Yes, it was Christ's blood, but once communion is over, it never turned into his blood. It's not still his blood. Now it's just an empty wine cup, and you know, the way most people. But some people feel very strongly that there's a number of churches, well, Little Girls Point, they use the little cups, but they're glass reusable. And they clean them and reuse them. And if there's any wine left, they dump the wine. Well, actually, they put it in their drain because their drain just goes right outside. They don't have a septic tank, or they just have a, you know. And actually, a lot of churches have that. They have a sink off the sanctuary where the altar guild works, and the sink just drains right outside. It's like a gray water from your camper or something, you know, so it doesn't go into the sewer system. But yeah, so anyway, so Luther's saying, you know, you're only giving them one thing. You're only giving them half of what they need. And he's not very happy with them. He says, therefore, dear brothers, for God's sake, I beg all of you who are pastors and preachers to devote yourselves sincerely to the duties of your office, that you feel compassion for the people entrusted to your care, and that you help us accordingly to inculcate this catechism in the people, especially the young. If you cannot do more, at least take the tables and charts for catechism instruction and drill the people in them word for word in the following way. First, the pastor should most carefully avoid teaching the 10 Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, the Creed, the sacraments, etc., according to various texts and differing forms. Let him adopt one version, stay with it, and from year to year, from one year to the next, keep using it unchanged. Young and inexperienced persons must be taught a single fixed form, or they will easily become confused, and the result will be that all previous effort and labor will be lost. There should be no change, even though one may wish to improve the text. Well, the synod decided to improve the text. The honored fathers understood this well, and therefore they all consistently used one form of the Lord's Prayer, the Creed, and the 10 Commandments. We should do as they did by teaching these materials to the young and common man without altering a single syllable and by never varying their wording when presenting or quoting them year after year. So adopt whatever form you wish and then stick with it at all times. If, however, you happen to be preaching to some sophisticated, learned audience, then you certainly may demonstrate your skill with words by turning phrases as colorfully and masterfully as you can. But with young persons, keep to a single fixed and permanent form and wording, and teach them first of all the 10 Commandments, the Creed, the Lord's Prayer, etc., according to the text, word for word, so they can repeat it after you and commit it to memory. How many here had to memorize all this stuff for confirmation? Yeah. 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 That was standard practice. And we still do that. You know, I have to admit, over the years, the memorization isn't quite as in-depth as it used to be. You know, and one of the things that's interesting is, even though he says you need to do it one way and stick with that one way, he does leave it open so that you can pick the way. You know, he doesn't say it needs to be this way. It just says you need to pick a way and you need to stick with that way. And that's the same that holds true with liturgy to a degree. You know, you need to have the same form of worship, the same order of worship. You know, our order of worship is the same every week. You know, we have the invocation, we have the preaching of the word, we have the service of the sacrament, we have the prayers. You know, that is done every week so that people get into that routine and know what's coming. There are some who say, well, you should only use one service. You know, I know pastors that use Divine Service 3 out of this hymnal every single Sunday of every single Sunday of the year. Yeah. Because they're taking Dr. Luther a little too literally, in my opinion. You know, if everybody in this congregation was brand new and had never attended a service before, then yeah, you would probably do the same thing over and over for a little while to get people used to it. But everybody in here, or just about everybody in here, is a learned person who understands to a degree what's going on, you know. So that's why, and repetition does build memory, you know, but do you need to memorize the service word for word? No, I don't think so. Yeah.
I did enjoy the screen.
You did enjoy the screen? Yeah.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
every time, but
Oh, yeah, yeah.
switch up.
It's a nice switch up, and I like to do it. Well, this is going to be interesting because I am going to use it for the next 6 Sundays after today, because every sermon, I'm doing a preset thing. You know, the outline is there with the slides. So we'll be doing it for a few weeks, and we'll see how people react. You know, I know churches that don't use a bulletin. All they have is the screens. Yeah, yeah. Everything is put up on the screens. The hymns, the prayers, everything is followed from the screens. Unfortunately, when this church was designed, it was designed to focus on what? The cross, you know. And I did one time, just out of curiosity, I projected a double image to the sides of the cross on the white up there. But A, I don't like it because I think it detracts from the cross. And B, it was still not that easy to see because it was even further up front at more of an angle. Ideally, at some point, I've talked to the people, the ladies, I would like to have 2 screens kind of centered almost where the banners are. And, oh, no problem. But, yeah, you know, so that way we could have them up. We'll see what happens. We've worked on it before. Some people like it. Some people don't care for it at all. But I kind of like it.
I remember when I was younger, my parents didn't take me to church, but I went to church on my own. I remember going in Sunday school at probably 4th grade, learning the 10 Commandments, and we had to commit them to memory. And they had a little bracelet that had a charm of each commandment, that as you memorized it, they put it on there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's different ways. There's a program out there called, I'm trying to remember, it's like Iwana or something like that. And it was, the kids all have a vest. And then every time they memorize something, they get another little badge to put on their vest. You know, it's just something to incentivize the children. What's that?
Like scouts.
Kind of like scouts, yeah. But, yeah. And they would, you know, when you memorize the Lord's Prayer, you got a little badge that you could put on, and 10 Commandments. And I think the commandments were actually individual. They had a little thing, and you put the numbers down as you memorized them. One of the things that I do with my confirmation class is, if you look at the Catechism, if we open it up, and I believe the 10 Commandments is first, used to be anyway. If they haven't moved that, you know, it says, what's first commandment? You shall have no other gods. What does this mean? We should fear, love, and trust God above all things. Now, if in the old days, all of you here probably had to memorize that exact thing. You had to memorize the commandment, and you had to memorize the explanation. What does this mean? I have shied away from that a little bit in its exactness. I don't know if it's school today or what, but it seems that the young people that I've been dealing with over the last 10 years anyway have somewhat a diminished ability to memorize. And what I have done is I make them read the explanation. We go over the explanation. I want them to understand what the explanation means, but I allow them to give me the explanation in their own words.
Could I make an example of that?
Sure.
I remember being in the barn. I was supposed to be doing my job, and it was one of the articles, I believe that I cannot, by my own reason or strength,
Yep.
in Jesus Christ, my Lord, come to them.
Right.
And I said, this don't make any sense.
Mhm.
It absolutely makes no sense.
Yep.
And it was, if I dare say it wasn't ever explained,
Mm-hmm.
I had to memorize it
Yep.
for the fear of God. I mean,
Yep.
exactly that.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
And what you're saying, I think, is very true. If you can have the little ones, oh, I know what that means.
Right. Yeah. See, to me, that's more important. It's more important to me that they understand what it means than just be able to recite what the meaning is. Especially in the older catechisms, the new one, like I say, this is still the same, but, some of that stuff was still had these and thous in it, and they don't understand that, And that's one of the things I do like about the new one is that they laid it out pretty well in the explanation. The other thing that I like about it is not only did the synod rewrite the explanation and put more emphasis on Scripture in it, but we also have a workbook that directly references the question numbers in the Catechism. So when they ask them a question and they say, well, we're not sure, we say, well, it's question number 234. Let's take a look at 234 and see what it says, and you can do it that way. And it makes it easier for them to try and find the right answer and hopefully understand it. But yeah, exactly what you're saying on that. Third article of the Apostolic Creed, by the way, Holy Spirit. I do not believe by myself, my own version. I can't even remember it right now in this second, but it is a very biggie. Yeah, that's a huge one. And like I say, particularly with the understanding of children in the world today versus this, they don't comprehend a lot of this. Even when we read the scriptures, when I have them read a passage out of scripture, my first question is, do you understand what that says? Yeah, what's trying to be said here? And a lot of times it's, I don't know, what I don't get it. What does it mean? And unfortunately, that's just the way of times, I think. But that's why I feel that it's important that we teach the Ten Commandments as they are. We teach the Lord's Prayer, we teach the Creed. But how we get the children to understand it and comprehend it, I think sometimes we have to be a little more flexible. And so that they can indeed understand it. I don't think any of them do any schoolwork the way that we do this kind of work anymore. Yeah. Well, that's it. They get their little what is it, Chromebook, and they're doing everything online, and they're doing that kind of stuff, and
Very rarely
yeah,
even have homework.
yeah, yeah,
It's all just memorize and regurgitate.
yeah. That's it. And that's the thing. Now, And I don't mind memorize and regurgitate as long as you know what you're regurgitating. If it's a mystery, if it's just words, then what good is it?
That's what everybody's teaching nowadays.
Well, it is, yeah, and that's why I feel that, and that's why I feel it's a problem if you just say, okay, you need to memorize this in its entirety. I tell them right up, I don't care if you memorize the explanation. If you want to, absolutely, I will help you with that. But what I really want you to be able to do is when I ask you to write down the 10 Commandments, I want you to be able to explain in your own words what each one of those commandments means. And that's what they need to do to pass my confirmation class. And I think that's a more worthwhile life experience than just rote memorization. So, yeah.
Even young students, when I asked one of the kids
Yeah.
the other day, he's do fish scales, biologist.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how did you remember everything at college? Well, I just memorized what I needed to know to pass this test, and then we went to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in college.
Yeah.
They really not. He said they taught us how to take tests.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the problem today, and part of that is because the education system has gotten locked up into this performance testing. You need to be at such a certain level, and your funding's based on how well you do with your testing and all of that kind of stuff. So what do? They teach the test, because that's what they need to get by. And I'm putting this live on the air. Somebody will probably hate me for that, but I really feel that that's the case. I mean, you want to have some fun, you can get it online. I've got a copy somewhere. Get the 8th grade primer from 1900.
Oh, gosh, no, don't.
I couldn't answer half the questions in that thing. I had to figure out hectaacres and all kinds of other stuff. There were all kinds of things in there. It would have taken me a long time to, and that was the 8th grade test.
Well, that's what's funny is they always, rag on your grandparents because a lot of them never passed 8th grade. And 8th grade is like...
Eighth grade was like high school or college, yeah.
Because back then you had to have multiple languages.
Yeah. Some of them did, yeah. And if you made it to high school, then you were really
Smart person.
Yep. So I mean, it's challenging. And this is, and to me, what we see in the world out here is a lot like what Luther talks about seeing in his world out there. And I think there's a lot of churches out there that are shortchanging their children as well. Now, I see our kids are up already. They're early today. Must have been a quick lesson. But I will let you guys read the rest of Luther's preface on your own. What I did want to just touch base on, and we'll talk more about it next week, is the Catechism itself. There are what we call the 6 parts. It's the 10 Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, the Apostles' Creed, and then I always confuse the other 2. There's the Sacrament of the Altar, there's baptism, and keys, the office of the keys. That's always another one to try and explain to the kids. It's a challenge. It's the office of the keys. Do you guys know what the office of the keys is? Jim's saying no. Yeah, what's that?
You just went through it this morning.
We did a little bit, yeah. But no, the office of the keys is basically, the office of the keys gives the pastor of the congregation the right to forgive or not forgive sins based on repentance. I have the key. It's the key, basically, to heaven. And it's handed down first to the apostles and then to those who later preach and teach. And that's why we talked last week, you weren't here last week, right? We talked a little bit last week about apostolic succession and how some churches believe that you have to, in order to be a pastor or a priest, you have to be ordained by someone who was ordained by someone who was ordained by Peter way back in the very beginning.
I was told not that long ago that that's what the Missouri Synod believed.
No.
So you gotta be, maybe you gotta.
No, actually, I believe the ELCA went to that. But I know like the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Church and, of course, the Catholic Church, and there's a couple others out there, believe in this apostolic succession. Is that in order to be a priest or a pastor, you have to be ordained by someone who was ordained by someone who can show this succession all the way back to Peter. Yeah. And no, that's what the whole Altenburg debate in 1847 with C.F.W. Walther and Marley was all about.
Why Peter?
Because he was the first pope. He was the first vicar of Christ. That's according to the Catholic Church. Yeah, and see, that's a Catholic Church thing that carried on for years and years. I don't know if the Orthodox Church teaches apostolic succession or not. But that would be interesting to see. Because the Orthodox Church split away in 800 or 400 something after the Nicene Creed. That's when the two churches split. Yeah.
I think Bugenhagen, was that the guy that was running around checking out the churches? That's why.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and Luther, yeah. Is it mentioned in here? Or, oh. Yeah. The name sounds familiar. Could have been him. Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to pull out my books. It's been a few years since but yeah. So anyway, so what I'd like to do now next week is start just taking a look at the Catechism. Just run through it kind of quickly. And if you've never seen it, it'll give you a good chance to take a look at it. If you're familiar with it, it'll be a good chance to refresh and remember. And then it's also a good chance to ask questions. One of the things that I don't know if you realize or not, but if you look at the 10 Commandments in the Lutheran Church and you look at the 10 Commandments in the Catholic Church, they're different. Yes, they are. And part of the reason stems on the first 3 or 4 commandments. Okay? We teach the first 3 commandments: thou shalt have no other gods, thou shalt not use the Lord's name in vain, and remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Those are the 3 God commandments. The Catholic Church breaks 2 into 2, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to remember. And then the other thing we do is to make it a nice even 10, because we don't have 4 in the beginning, we only have 3 in the beginning. We split coveting in half. First thing is coveting living things, and second thing is coveting non-perishable goods. House, home, car, truck, farm, Yeah, the wife is the one above, the living things, wife, animals, that kind of thing. So we break those into 2. And, but yet we always seem to teach it as 1 because it gets confusing sometimes. But we'll look through the commandments next week, and then if we get time, we'll go on into the Lord's Prayer and take that. What Luther does is he breaks everything down into little pieces. And like, for example, when we get to the Lord's Prayer, I think it's, I can never remember, 7 parts, yeah. The Apostolic Creed, of course, is 3, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Yeah, because he does like, Our Father who art in heaven, that's 1. 7 petitions in the Lord, it's the Lord's Prayer.
There's 9 technically, because
Well, yeah, there's the conclusion, and then there's the yeah. But as far as the actual lines, so we'll take a look at that next week, and I'll get you a handout. You can come join us if you want, Jasper. I almost called you Casper, but you're not that ghostly. But yeah, so. But anyway, any questions, thoughts, comments? Oh, you keep dropping something? Don't do that. No. All right.
Bring the Baltimore Catechism to them?
The Baltimore Catechism? No. Oh, and just as an aside, there are two catechisms. There's a small and a large. The large, this is the large right here. It's 78 pages, and basically the small catechism was made for the people, and the large catechism was made for the clergy. Yeah, for pastors and vicars and deacons and things like that, people that were going to be serving in the church. And it basically just does the same thing as the small catechism, just like I say, it goes into much more detail on it. One of the nice things about it is Luther has a section in here on infant baptism, which is always an interesting question because, you know, we believe in it. There are a lot of churches that don't. And Luther talks about why, which is, he's got some good stuff on that. If anybody would like a copy of the large catechism, I did print out a few if you'd like to take one with you. You got one. I figured you would probably have one. So if anybody would like one, would you like a copy of the large catechism as well? Sure. Why not? You don't have to read it or anything, but more reading material. So yeah, but I have more if anybody else wants one. Jim says he's good. Jane, are you good, or you got one? All right. You want one? Okay, Aaron. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. And once again, you may find other ones, and they may not be exactly the same. Part of the reason why, it's all written in German. And different people translate German differently. So you may see things that are a little bit different or a little bit off, but it's mostly because of translation. Yeah. All right. So, are we good? Same time, same place? Next week?
Same station.
What's that?
Same station.
Same station, absolutely. All right, well, let's close with the Lord's Prayer then. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Yeah.